All right, welcome. Today we are going to dive into a really powerful story about getting stuck in a painful cycle and, more importantly, how to finally break free. We're going to look at this whole thing through two incredible lenses: modern therapy and ancient spiritual wisdom. So this quote right here, it really sets the stage for everything. It's this idea that sometimes something that looks like a gift, something that feels like kindness on the surface, is actually bait. It's a hook designed to pull you right back in. And this all comes from a super personal story about a 5-year relationship, one that was stuck in this brutal cycle of breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together, and every single time there was that same promise: this time it'll be different.
Wow, what a metaphor, right? A paper boat. It just perfectly captures that feeling of being so fragile, so completely at the mercy of someone else's emotional storm, just terrified that at any moment you're going to completely fall apart.
And this is the moment it all comes to a head. You finally escape the storm, you're free. And then, a simple birthday message pops up on your phone. Seems harmless, right? But it's a huge choice. Do you reply, just to be nice or gracious? Or do you listen to that little voice inside that's whispering, hey, this is a trap?
So how do we even begin to unpack a cycle like this? I mean, why is it so incredibly hard to break free? Well, the very first step, and it's a huge one, is just giving the experience a name.
And that name is trauma bonding. And I'm telling you, just learning that term can be a total game changer, because it helps you realize this wasn't love. It was a really powerful psychological pattern, one that's fueled by this unpredictable mix of good times and bad times that creates this super strong, almost addictive connection. And this is how it works, It's often not some big dramatic explosion. It's the slow, steady erosion of your self-worth. It's the little comments, the tiny cuts that you might even laugh off at the time, but over years, they carve themselves into how you see yourself.
And this brings us to a massive aha moment. That impulse to always be the good one, to always say yes. It wasn't real compassion, it was fear, plain and simple. Fear of being rejected, a deep, deep need for approval that got so twisted it started to mistake collapsing for caring. So, we have the psychological label, but why do we get trapped in these patterns in the first place? Well, for that, we can look to this incredibly clear and ancient framework for understanding exactly where this kind of suffering comes from.
The Buddha taught that our suffering really boils down to these three things: craving, aversion, and ignorance. And when you look at this story, boom, it maps on perfectly. The craving for his approval, the aversion or fear of being rejected, and the ignorance of actually believing that this destructive cycle was love.
And can you just imagine the relief in seeing that? Realizing this wasn't some terrible fate you were doomed to repeat. It was just conditioning. It was a learned behavior. And the most beautiful thing about that is, anything that has been learned can be unlearned.
This insight also completely reframes what we think of as compassion. You see, there's this compassion that's driven by fear. You say yes because you feel obligated. You need to be seen as the good guy. But then there's wisdom-led compassion. That's a whole different level. It's knowing that sometimes silence is the most loving thing you can do, that protecting yourself is actually protecting everyone from an illusion.
Okay, so with this brand new, much clearer understanding, what do we actually do? How do we break free? Let's get into the practical tools, the actual prescription for creating real, lasting freedom. And at the very heart of this is this beautiful idea, the two wings of freedom. Think about it. You need both wings to fly, right? Well, it's the same here. Compassion without wisdom just collapses. You end up enabling things that are harmful. But wisdom without compassion can make you hard and cold. It's only when you bring them together that they can actually carry you through the storm. So how do you actually use this in the heat of the moment? Well, here's an incredibly simple but profound tool: 3 breaths. With the first breath, you just notice the trigger, that text message, that feeling. The second breath, you feel the physical sensation in your body, that tightness in your chest, that heat. And with the third breath, you consciously release it. You tell yourself, this is not mine to carry. Just think about the power in that. 3 breaths, that's it. Freedom doesn't have to be some giant, dramatic escape. Sometimes it's a tiny, conscious choice you make in the space of a moment. Just enough space to step off the hook. And when you start making that small choice, again and again, it starts to change the whole story. It actually transforms that feeling of fragility
from a weakness into an unexpected source of strength. This brings us to another amazing metaphor, the raft. The whole point is that these teachings, these tools, they aren't just some abstract ideas to admire from a distance. They're a raft. They have one purpose: to get you from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom.
But for so long, that raft was just sitting there, unused. The old instinct was to jump back in the water and try to swim back into the storm, right? Clinging to the fantasy of what could be instead of the painful reality of what was.
And this is where we can kind of turn the mirror on ourselves for a second. Can you think of a time when maybe you clung to a fantasy more than the reality? A time when you mistook all that drama, all the intense highs and lows for real intimacy? Now, just imagine for a second, what would it feel like to see that situation with total clarity? If you could push past that fog of craving, what would awareness see that you just couldn't see before? And that brings us right back around to our little paper boat. But it's totally different now, isn't it? It's no longer a symbol of being terrified. It's about resilience. It's about accepting your fragility, and at the same time, finding the quiet courage to just float, to let the current carry you forward to a new shore.